Welcome to the MHP Exchange, where the riches are in the niches. We'll show you how to invest your way into mobile home parks with real strategies, tips, and behind-the-scenes know-how to grow your cash flow. Stick around. This is where smart investing begins.
Today's guest on the MHP Exchange podcast is Kevin Bupp. He's the founder of Sunrise Capital Investors, and he's the host of Real Estate Investing for Cash Flow. Kevin has been, for the last 2 decades, building wealth by leaning into overlooked asset classes. And while most investors were rushing into apartments, he was focused in manufactured housing. And now he's making a major push into what might be the most contrarian cash flow play of all, parking lots. The conversation is about how Kevin got his start, the scars, the lessons, and the exact way he looks at operations, mitigating risk, and scaling. So if you want to talk with a top 1% operator and get real insight on what it takes to generate wealth and cash flow in the real estate market, you have Kevin Bupp here to talk to, sharing his knowledge today. Kevin, thank you for joining the program.
Hey, Frank. Always good to see you, man. Appreciate you having me here.
Appreciate you being on, Kevin. And for anybody that doesn't know Kevin Bupp or Sunrise Capital, just to give everybody a little bit of background on it. I mean, you basically started in the real estate business at 19 years old, right? Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah. Well, I joke and say that I've never had a real job. It's only really been real estate, and about the closest I got to a real job was tending bar back in the day. But yeah, no, I always like to say that real estate found me. I didn't find it, and I'm very grateful for that pivotal period of my life. I was always entrepreneurial as a kid. Both my parents worked full-time jobs. Neither one had a college education. And so, but we lived a middle-class lifestyle, never went without, but never had, excess, never had too much, went on one family vacation a year. So it was all relative. Like I didn't know what I didn't know what we didn't have, or didn't know what we had, just like, that was just my childhood. But the one thing I did know is that, we didn't have a lot of extra money. And so basically it was either birthday or Christmas, is when you got that one thing, the newest skateboard or whatever it was. Outside of those special occasions, either you figure out a way to make the money so you can go buy those things yourself, or you just don't get it. And so at a young age, I was always trying to hustle and shovel snow, mow grass, do different things so I could make an extra buck so that I could go buy those things, not necessarily have to wait for a holiday to come around. And that's just, I think that I always had that drive. At the age of 12, I had a paper out, actually a huge paper out, and made a lot of money at that age doing that. Learned how to install electronics into cars. I had an older brother, so he was driving age, and he had a lot of friends. Back then it was cool to have a loud stereo in your car. And my dad taught me the basics of electronics. And so in the garage on the weekends, I would install car stereos, CD players for those that don't remember, or even tape decks back then.
Did you have the ones that pulled out of the car?
Right? Well, yeah, that was like the latest and greatest shit back then. Had the pull outs, and then after that became the ones where you detached the front of it.
Yes,
came off of it. But my dad was in, he did go to like a short technical school. So he was really into electronics. He was very handy. Like that generation was just handy in general. Right. And so like, he just knew how to do everything. He taught me the basics. And so I saw that as an opportunity to make money. And so I would install car stereos and amplifiers and in cars and make money there. And so anyway, long story short, I was always trying to find a way to make money. And, but I wasn't academically driven. So I graduated high school with no plan. None of my family went to college. My brother literally was the first in our family to go away to university. I feel like he kind of squandered that away. But anyway, we're not here to talk about him. So that wasn't really a big part of my upbringing of like, get great grades so that you can go to school. Really, my parents would have been just as happy if I'd have just got a job at UPS or whatever, like, anything that was with a big company that in their eyes had opportunity for growth, right? I could start at the bottom, work my way up over time. And that's just, I wasn't excited about that either. I didn't know what I was excited about. I just wanted to make money, Frank, really. At that age, it was all driven. It was, how do I make money, buy the cooler car to just, go on trips and things like that. And that luckily at the age of 19, when I was going to community college, trying to figure out what I wanted to do, I started dating a girl, and this girl, her mother had recently gone through a divorce, and she started dating a guy in the local area, and his name was David. David was a real estate investor. I never met a business owner before. My parents didn't have any business owner friends. Entrepreneur wasn't really even a word I understood. But I got to know David just from seeing him over at the house, and he owned rental properties, single family and some small multifamily stuff in Pennsylvania where I grew up. And I just being around, him and I had conversations, and I tried to understand what he did, and it still didn't really resonate with me, of how someone could own, 30 or 35 houses or properties. But that's what he did. And what I did notice about him is that he just dressed a little different, drove a little nicer car, seemingly had a lot of flexibility in his lifestyle, to where like he was around during the day when old people should be at their job. Right. David actually invited me, this is the moment that changed my life. I mean, he invited me to a conference in Philadelphia that he'd already paid for. Ron LeGrand was teaching it. Ron LeGrand he's still out there teaching it. The guy's got to be 80 years old, of how to fix and flip houses or wholesale houses. And I went to this conference and didn't know what I was going to learn. All I knew is that it was like I think $3,500 that David paid for it. And I'm like, I'm going to go, I'm going to go attend this thing and see if I can extract something out of it. And what happened there, Frank, was I sat, there was a couple hundred people. There was a big group. I sat, surrounded myself at the tables throughout those 3 days with other people that in my mind were doing huge things, right? Like they were, either wholesaling houses, making $10,000-$15,000 checks, or they were at rental portfolios, and they were, at 50 rentals, and they were making $20,000 a month of passive income after debt service and expenses and all that. And like, that was just like mind blowing to me. But the one thing I pulled away from that was that these were all highly successful people. I didn't think that they were any different than I. Like, I didn't identify that, hey, this guy went to school for 8 years in order to do this, right? Like most of them were just, I worked as an HVAC tech, and then I started flipping houses, and now I got a portfolio of 40 homes. I'm like, well, this sounds not simple, but like there's no massive barriers to entry other than some education and just getting to understand what they're doing and how they're doing it. And so I left that conference excited. And I knew that if I didn't do something, I would go back to the normal routine, and the excitement would fade, and it would have been a worthless endeavor. And so I went to David and I made him an offer he couldn't refuse, and that was basically to come work for him for free. He was about 25 years older than I, and so I saw some areas where he struggled. He did a bad job of like returning emails, and just because he was slow with technology, and even like he was a solopreneur, so he didn't have an assistant, so he would not return phone calls in a timely manner. And so I said, hey man, let me come help you out with your business. And really my objective is to help you maybe grow your business, make it easier, your day to day, and hopefully I can learn from you. I can be like around you and hear what you say, how you say it, and all that. And he accepted. And that was the start of it. That was age of 19. I literally, in between tending bar in the evenings, I'd work Thursday, Friday, Saturday night. So I had a lot of time during the day, and I only took like 12 credits in school. So I had a lot of free time during Monday through Friday working hours. And I would be doing whatever he needed. I would go drop leases off, pick them up, put signs out, bandit signs on the corner. I would return phone calls. I would act as an assistant. I would go pick up coffee, whatever. And through that year or so, I got to hear who he said, what he said, who he said it to, why he said it. I got to meet some of his contacts, private lenders, just his little network. And so at the age of 20, I bought that first property. I bought a single family home. Wasn't trying to reinvent the wheel. So I just said, hey, what David's doing obviously is working. So let me see if I can just model his process. And now's the start of it, man. I mean, I bought that first property at 20. Bought a couple more in Pennsylvania before I moved to Florida at the age of 22, which is where I reside now with my family. Down in Florida is when the game changed. I met another guy down here who became my second mentor, and he had, like 700 single family homes. And it was like, holy shit, how do you do that? Right. And that's when my eyes really opened to a really big game and how to multiply, just not being a solopreneur, but build a company. And so like, those next couple of years, man, I ended up buying about 122 single family homes, a few hundred apartment doors, and started dabbling in some commercial real estate. Lost it in 2008, started in 2011 to rebuild. And that's when mobile home parks came in. I was introduced to mobile home parks in 2011, and then we've been buying them ever since.
So what's really interesting about the story, because it's hard for people to understand now if you're listening to this podcast today, but 25, 30 years ago, entering real estate at 19 was almost unheard of. It was an industry that people kind of fell into. It was an industry that people went to directly. Most people, and especially people from your background. I mean, I got my real estate license at 19. I was a canary in a coal mine. Everybody I was working with was older. It was a second career or a transition into it. So for you to get in there at 19 and to find a mentor, which was key, really kind of gives you an opportunity to take a look at that industry in a different way, and it gives you a head start, because most people during that time frame, they weren't going into real estate first, and you now have like a 10-year head start on them because of that, being open minded and getting that mentor at that early age.
Yeah, no, I agree. Again, that's why I say I'm so grateful and feel so blessed that the timing, right? And that's why, like anything that's happening in your life, just know that there's a reason for it. You don't know exactly where you're going to end up, or these little events that occur, and what they're going to amount to. And you look back 10, 20 years down the road, and you realize that, holy shit, if that little thing wouldn't have happened, good or bad, I wouldn't be where I'm at today. And so, like, again, that was like a very pivotal moment in my journey, and one that really just, again, it was really, there's two big pivotal moments. One was meeting David and going to that event. Both of those had to happen together, right? Because that event, I met other people. I realized this wasn't an isolated thing. That David was great, but there were a lot of other people that were doing big things from across the country, and that, again, I didn't feel much different than they just knew something I didn't know at that point in time. And even to your point of back then, at least in town I grew up in, there was no real estate investment club. I was 2.5 hours from Philly. That was the closest real estate meetup that existed, in a completely different market though. So it wasn't even necessarily relevant to to where I was. And so there wasn't a support mechanism like there is today. There weren't resources. You can go get books on tape, Carlton Sheets, Ron LeGrand. There was only a couple back then. You'd listen to tapes about how they're doing, no money down or buying rental properties. But that was really it. And today's so different because there's so many resources out there. In fact, it drives me crazy when someone says, I don't know how to do that, or I don't know what to do. It's like, have you Googled it? Use ChatGPT or YouTube? Those three. If you haven't done that yet, why are we talking about this, right? Because I guarantee there's an answer, multiple answers, and multiple ways to you'll solve your problem, whatever it might be, or learn, whatever skill set you're trying to learn. It's out there. The information is already there.
So in 2011, now you go down to Florida, you have tremendous success speculating homes. I mean, you're flipping homes in Florida. The market's hot in the early 2000s. I'm sure you saw that cycle change with the Great Recession, which changes the dynamics there. But where everybody else kind of pivot, some people double down on single family homes, other people are going into multifamily. You make the decision to go into mobile home parks. Like, what was that thought process like? Because back then, and the interesting thing is, like, back then there was very little information. You talk about having little information, there was even less about mobile home parks. What made you decide that that's where I want to plant my flag? Or was it just like a dip your toe in the water kind of situation?
It's a great question. And just to back up, so I wasn't, when I moved down here, I wasn't flipping house. Most of what we bought to hold, and we were kind of cash flow investors even back then. But it was just happened to be single family and some multifamily stuff, and some commercial as well. But the part of my portfolio that really crushed me during the recession was my single family home portfolio down here, just for a multitude of reasons. We don't necessarily have to go down that rabbit hole, and so what happened is I lost everything in 2008, lost my personal residence, bank accounts garnished. I mean, it was rough. It was a rough 3 years of trying to figure out how the hell I was going to claw my way back out and do anything again, right? And actually try to rebuild and just even keep the roof over my head. Luckily, the roof stayed over my head for a couple of years because the foreclosure backlog was so real in the court system that I did not get kicked out right away when I couldn't pay my mortgage on my home. But so I had a couple of years where I could actually kind of survive and manage through the chaos. But anyway, to answer your question, what happened is in 2011, so 3 years after, I was, I feel like my head was enough above water to where I need to do something. I need to find another path. And I was like, well, real estate's all I've really ever known. And so let's see what the landscape looks like today. This is, post GFC, but still very in the beginning stages of recovery. I mean, in fact, a lot of folks would even argue that the recovery really didn't start happening until 2013 and 14. And so there was still a lot of distress in the marketplace, lots of foreclosures, lots of REOs. But so I went out and I just started meeting other people that were mostly in multifamily. And the reason behind that, Frank, was that I looked back on my historic portfolio, which was, like I said, 122 single family rental homes. And then I had a couple hundred apartment units. Mostly were like, 12 unit, 24 unit property, 72 unit property, like smaller or medium sized multifamily properties. And I realized that I literally bought all those apartments, and I had a JV. And so I wasn't actively out there hunting for them, but I was a big money partner in them. I bought literally 3 times the amount of apartment units in a fraction of the time it took me to build that single family home portfolio. And the inefficiencies that existed in the single family home stuff that were spread amongst 5 counties of leasing agents driving around, maintenance guys driving around, it kicked my ass on the property management side. And so I was like, the second time around, I'm not touching single family stuff. It'd take me too long to rebuild. It's too slow. And so let's just go buy some apartment buildings. So it seems like that's a better answer. And so I went out with the intent of meeting everyone that was either made it through the downturn or was maybe just getting started, right? And they're out there buying what the lending landscape looked like. And during this exploratory mission I went on for probably like 6 or 8 months, I was trying to meet as many people as possible. So I met a guy by the name of Randy. He was introduced to me by a mutual friend. Randy had been a commercial banker for 30 years. That's all I knew. And I just was having lunch with him to learn more about him and find out how I could help him, how he could possibly help me. And that was really it. No objective or agenda of the conversation. What I found out when I met Randy was that he had recently retired as a 30-year commercial banking veteran, and he bought two mobile home parks in Florida here as retirement. And his reason was that the last 10 years of his lending career, he had a lot of clients that were in the mobile home park space, and he got to see, financially how they performed, right? He had helped them get origination loans. He had helped them do cash out refinances, and he got to see the HUD statements, and he got to see that these things absolutely crushed the game of life and that they were a very sound financial investment. And so he pitched me on all the other great reasons why mobile home parks were awesome, that they're not building them anymore, that, there's very few folks move their homes out of these communities. A lot of them are being run by mom and pops. They don't really have professional operations in place. And so they're inefficient. And so there's a lot of opportunity there. And so anyway, he gave me all the pitch that you and I know today of why we love the space. And so it intrigued me enough where I left that lunch meeting. Again, this is 2011. And I went to go dig and find information. And to your point, there was one resource out there. It was Frank and Dave. They had I don't even think they did in-person boot camps back then, but they had a CD course, a home study course on CDs. And I bought it and I went through it and I'm like, man, there's something here. And they had a book. I think they had wrote a book as well. And I was like, man, okay, they say it's great. Like Randy said, it was great. So I'm gonna go buy one. I'm gonna go test the waters. And I looked and I got cold feet, put things under contract. And I finally bought one in 2012 up in Atlanta. It was about as distressed as it gets. 34 unit, all park owned homes, all vacant with the exception of one home. All had been, it was an REO. I'd been sitting there for like a year and a half. And so vandalized, AC units stolen, needed a lot of work, and it wasn't really lendable. And we brought a private lender and bought the first one and worked my ass off to get it stabilized, driving back and forth to Atlanta every week, 8 hours back and forth. And did really well. Did the first one, and then that was compelling enough that I bought the second. Probably just like you, bought the second, bought the third, bought the fourth. See if I could keep replicating the success that I had, and that was really the start of it. So there really was just a random lunch meeting, got me excited about the niche. Bought Frank and Dave's course, got me even more excited about it, and I realized it was very fragmented. It was good and bad at that point. It was good in that there was parks out there you could buy. It was bad in that it was incredibly hard to get financing. I remember banging my head against the wall back then, trying to get banks to understand, not necessarily the first one, but the next couple. I had deals I lost because I literally couldn't get the bank to understand how great this thing was, even though on paper it showed how great it was. Their biggest fear was that the mobile homes were going to leave. I'm like, things have been here for 30 years. You think that they're going to have left? They would have left already, right? Anyway, I'll stop there. But that's how I got into it. It's just a random occurrence, and I took that little bit of knowledge and excitement and dug deeper. And here we are now. 13 years later.
You know what I love about that story? And people don't realize this about real estate enough, right? There's no paycheck in real estate. There's no clock you punch, right? You start every day, with what you've built. And then as an entrepreneur, you went through the challenges, and people don't realize, especially the new people who've gotten into real estate now, they don't realize what that time frame between 2007 and 2011 was really like. because the feeling you remember, I remember waking up every day not knowing what the next shoe to drop is, if deals were going to close, if you know we were specking homes at that time. Was I going to be able to get out of properties that we purchased? You know, we ended up not getting out of, you know, taking properties that were profits, turning them into losses. And there was challenges that I don't think some investors realize, or some new people realize, how challenging that time was. And then you having gone through kind of having to reinvent yourself, right? Coming in and finding this space. And what is it that they say? And you know, desperation is the mother of invention, right? So
Yeah.
you sat there in a situation where, like, I have to reinvent myself. How do I make myself bigger, better, bolder? And then you find an opportunity in this space, and where everybody else is walking away, you dive deep, and then you make it work from there. And you started with one, but how many communities have you been through at this point
Yeah,
from that?
that's a good question. I probably in the 40 range. I think we've gone full cycle on 19 now. And I think we have 21 in our portfolio, give or take. So somewhere in the, you know, the 40, 45 range. There are probably a couple in there that I'm not thinking of, but
Okay. So here's where I like to get, and love having the conversations with other operators where we can kind of go a little bit deeper into this, because I love finding out like their strategies, their operational tactic points, and things that they're focused on. But for yourself, I mean, sourcing deals, which I know has been a pain point for a lot of investors or operators in the space now. How are you guys focused on finding opportunities? Because I know you're still buying. Is it brokers? Are you going direct to owners? Or is it purely based on relationships that you have in the markets that you're already in?
I think all the above. I would say that up until probably 4 years ago, 99% of what we sourced was direct to owner. And that was just us pounding, you know, many years back, many moons back, us building our own database internally, having a, you know, team of virtual assistants help us build that. And then all I had was time, right? Like I'd pick up the phone and I would, you know, dial, you know, spend a couple hours a day dialing the phone. And I had a very basic CRM system. I don't know if it's still around. I think it was Insightly. It was free, and I would literally make calls and I would document the conversation. And I would just keep dialing, and I would follow up with folks, touch base with them on a regular basis, and just learn about their, you know, kind of their plans, you know, if they'd ever considered selling. And then, so just through those relationships that we formed over years with owners, most of what we bought was a result of that. And I would say that, again, up to 4 years ago, that was the primary source. And then, you know, we started, there's a couple of changes that we saw. I think part of it was probably an evolution of the types of parks we were buying, you know, the size and quality and things like that, to where it was like more owners like yourself, or, you know, larger groups that were owning these assets, or more sophisticated, even mom and pops, you know, not just your typical one, but like more sophisticated, smaller operators. And so the direct to owner approach has kind of morphed more into direct to owner, probably equal amounts of broker relationships, of working with a broker. As you know, there's some great ones within our industry. You know, 15 years ago, that didn't really, there was a couple, but there were hardly any. And most of them were, you know, random broker in the middle of Alabama. Yeah, I sell Alabama, or I sell Oklahoma, you know, like, and they sold rural parks, and, you know, not the stuff that we're seeing today. And so, so the broker relationships are I think are absolutely critical. I mean, you got to think, I think of it this way. They're an extension of me. I mean, they're basically doing the same prospecting I'm doing, or our team was doing, but they're doing it on a mass scale. I mean, that's their business. They get paid to pull a transaction together. And so why wouldn't you leverage, the broker's resources and the energy that they're putting into the prospecting to help also source deals? And so, we bought some of the best parks in the last probably 4 years as a result of brokers. Some of the larger, you know, just killer deals that we've got, they were a result of brokers out there pounding the pavement. So, I don't know if there's a right or wrong there, but, I do think, you know, Frank, I still think there's probably a better opportunity in the smaller stuff, just to go direct to owner. I do believe, you know, I think you can still have great success and still get good responses, you know, in that 20 to 30, 40 site range. I still think there's a lot of that fragmented stuff out there where it's just a single owner. You know, you call them, you can still get their phone number, and you can still reach the right person that makes the decisions. And they probably haven't necessarily considered all their options. I still think that folks can find a lot of success building a portfolio and that smaller stuff doing direct to owner. But I think if you're going to start buying the bigger, nicer stuff, most of those sellers don't even want to sell direct to owner. They want to have an intermediary, a broker, help them facilitate the transaction. So I think some of that stuff doesn't even become a possibility unless you're willing to work with a broker.
So, and Kevin, you and your company, you do focus on turnarounds. I mean, you'll do infill, but when you come into a community, what's the first, targets that you have to turn that community around? Is it culture? Is it collections? Is it infrastructure? I mean, where do you and your team focus on first, where you could drive the most value?
Yeah, I guess and there's different types of value add, right? There's the heavier lifts, and then we bought many value adds that are just more of a infill component, and then a loss to lease recapture over call it a 5-year span. But like the park itself is in phenomenal shape, and it's well kept, well maintained, manicured, right? But there's quite a bit of opportunity there over the next 5 years. And then we bought the opposite end of the spectrum, which is it's a heavy lift everywhere, right? Like it might have a significant loss to lease recapture and infill component, but also the infrastructure is shit. The roads are in bad shape. Amenities, if it has any, a playground, all the equipment's run down or it's broken. Homes are missing skirting. The roofs are rusty. The trees haven't been trimmed in 30 years, right? And they're posing risk. And so normally what we do is we go on stuff like that. We want to, before we ever raise rents or do anything like that, we'll go in and clean up all of what's currently there. And we'll normally do roads. If there's going to be an infill piece of it, normally we'll go in and do, kind of Band-Aid fixes to the roads, or like pothole repair, anything that's like of a risk that's going to, bust your tire or bust a tie rod or something like that in your car, or a trip hazard. We'll do basic repairs on that stuff, but we'll go in and trim all the trees. We call it a hug a home program, internal program where, we'll either go fix, if there's POH in there, we'll fix all the stuff we own. We'll repaint the roofs. We'll put new siding on if we have to, put new skirting on, new decks. And then if the TOH stuff, tenant home stuff, you'll work to enforce these quality standards, these change quality standards. And we always have folks that they don't have the money, don't have the budget. So we have a program in-house, like a financing program where we can actually do it for them, and we'll just, tack it onto the rent. We've got a couple different solutions there to basically enhance the community, just do a makeover, right? Like do a major makeover. We do new signage. Like we'll do not just entry signs. We go through and put street signs in, stop signs. We have kind of a color coordination that we've created internally. That's like our brand. And so we'll go in and just, breathe new life into the community before we do anything else. And so that's kind of the first step. And then really the second step after that is, and a lot of times simultaneously, is like cleaning up delinquencies. There's still bad apples that we might need to work them out of the community. Renovate park-owned homes. That kind of goes, hand in hand with that. But once we get the basis of the community stabilized, only then will we look to do a rent increase. So most of the rent increases we do, at least initial ones, assuming that it hadn't just been done, from the prior ownership, normally they're like 9 months out, give or take. And that gives us a long runway to, kind of prove our concept, show folks good faith that here, we're not just saying it, we're here to actually make things better for you, to make your living experience better in this community, make it something you're proud of, before we ever consider to raise rents or do any other type of major changes that are going to be a increase in cost to them. So I'll stop there for a moment.
You know what you said there that resonates, because we do something very similar. And a lot of operators I speak with don't do this. When you come in and you see tenant-owned homes, you make the improvements to their homes if the residents don't do it. You set the standard, and then you understand that some of your residents don't have the ability to do that work to meet that standards, even though it will protect the integrity of their home. So we look at it as it's easier to go with that, guiding the rent close to the market if we're giving them value. And if we go and we fix the underpinning, we give them skirting, we redo their deck, and then say, in turn for us doing this work, we're going to move that rent close to the market. We're essentially financing that work for you. If you don't have the $3,000 to do it, we're financing it. For us, we're getting the value of not only the increased lot rent, but we're also getting the value of that home looking nicer. And to your point, if you're bringing in, if part of that value creation is infill, no one wants to buy a brand new home, even if it's the best value in town, if the home next to you doesn't look nice, right? And so by making that home look nicer, It makes the infill a little bit easier. Now, and I want to talk to you quickly about infill because I know, right? Not that I track you guys or anything, but I do. I know that you guys are putting 100. The plan is 100 new homes on in your communities this year. Is that right?
Yeah, it's 100 or 130. Yeah, somewhere right around there. Yes,
It's
correct.
an aggressive number. I love hearing that. How do you look at that for absorption rate? Like before you commit to making that purchase, is there some metrics you look in the community to make sure that, hey, I'm bringing these homes in. I know what the market can absorb. Do you run them all as for sale? Do you rent some of them? Like, what's your
Yeah.
strategy with that?
And I will say this, I will start this with a little bit of a background to better understand who we are and how we've evolved as a company. I would say up until literally 2 years ago, we normally would not, we weren't the infill guys. It's difficult. There's lots of logistics. There's lots of talent you really need to pull that off successfully and actually make money doing it. And I've seen more people lose money trying to do a big infill than actually come out on top. And so for that reason, while we might buy communities that had an infill opportunity, we normally weren't the guys that would be willing to pay for that upside potential. And so there's probably a lot of deals that we didn't buy that we should have or could have, and it probably, killed it. But we weren't, we didn't have the infrastructure or the team in place that we felt was going to be necessary to do it at a bigger scale. And so for that reason, we just avoided it. We just didn't do it. We weren't those guys. But over the last couple of years, we've really built out a robust operations team, and we've got a number of folks on the team that have successfully scaled other MHC organizations, have done major infills, hundreds of homes a year type thing. And so we've got the talent and the skill set in place now to do that. And so, and the reason I say all that is all but one of the parks we currently own that we're doing these infills on for this year, this calendar year, all of them were not purchased based on having to infill units to make the deal work. In addition to that, we've owned all these parks now for some as short as maybe 2 years, some as long as like 5 or 6 years. And so we actually know what the absorption rate is. We have a good understanding of the demand in the marketplace because like we intimately know these properties. And so that's how we know, like, we don't necessarily have a formula for how many homes should we bring in here. We do, but we don't, but we know what the data says based on, the demand for whether we're turning units in there that are POH. Like we have a good indicator because we've owned them for a number of years. And so it's very different when we go into there's one community we bought recently in the past year and a half that's in North Carolina, and it's I think it's 197 lots, and only about 45 are occupied. They're all developed lots. 20 years ago it was fully occupied. Long story of why it why it's got vacant. Homes got yanked out, but basically an old owner owned about 100 of the homes. It got taken back. The guy that bought it out of REO raised rents on the guy. The old owner that lost the park didn't lose the homes. He had them in a separate entity. And he literally yanked 100 of his homes out of the park, and then the thing just deteriorated from there. Yeah. I mean, like that was like a decade plus ago, and absolutely crushed the guy we bought it from because he just didn't have the capital, and so he limped this thing along. He bought it at such a low base, he limped it along, but slowly but surely lost other homes. And when we bought it, I think there was like 55 in there, and then we demoed I think a dozen or so. But this one, it's in Greensboro, North Carolina, so it is a phenomenal market. And it's literally like 10 minutes outside of downtown. And so I know the economic drivers in that region. I know the median home prices are, $350,000. The median rents are like, for a 2-bedroom apartment are like $1,900 a month. I just know from my prior experience that there is, just based on those numbers, those demographics, there is a severe demand and need for affordable housing in that market. And so we run test ads and things like that, but we ran test ads before we closed on this, and like what we expected happened. We got overwhelmed putting homes out at like $1,500 a month for rent or for sale, and we were literally hundreds of inquiries. In the first 2 weeks we had hundreds of inquiries, and I'm like, okay, that proves to me that there's a need here. And so we drew out a 4-year plan on that property. So it wasn't overnight we're going to bring in 100 homes, or in the first year 100 homes. It's staggered, like 30 homes a year, or 35 homes a year, or something like that. So not an exact formula, but like I know the market well enough, and we've owned there before, and I know that the need's there, and there's not a lot of affordable housing available.
So do you rent the new homes, or do you just strictly sell them?
We do both. And every market's a little different. In a perfect world, we would sell everything and it would fly off the shelves, right? In this community, we're out of every 10 homes, roughly 7 are actually sales and 3 are rentals. Based on
Got
how
it.
we've been bringing them in, we don't want them to sit, right? We want to be occupied, like at most like a 45-day window after they're set and ready to go. In order to achieve that, we've had to rent about 3 out of every of the 10 homes that we brought in, which is actually that's a really good ratio. That's a strong ratio. And then we have a rental conversion program in place that typically in the first in the latter half, like month 7, 8, we really start pushing and give incentives to convert that. And we use a number of lenders, 21st, Automatic's one of them, Triad, and we work to hopefully convert that renter into a homeowner. And sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. But we have other instances, Frank, to answer that question of do we rent or do we sell? Like we have another park right now that we're doing a pretty big infill, and I think we're bringing 22 homes this year. It's one of our parks in Illinois. And that one, I'm fairly confident. I just know the market. We've owned the park for years. It's a good sales market. And right now, the existing park is nearly 100% tenant homes. But the absorption of new sales versus rentals, it's just not the same. It's quite the opposite. So for every 10, we end up selling 3 and renting about 7. And then so we'll have to aggressively convert those rentals over the next. We kind of have like a 3-year plan to convert them into a portion of them into homeowners over time.
I think you have to have that flexibility in this space, because your customer base, a lot of times they might not have that full down payment to purchase the home right now, and you have to create a pathway for them to achieve home ownership. And I think we are in the affordable housing sector, and so you have to create affordable options with some flexibility inside the communities to do this. I want to touch on this because you've also, while you've been very successful in MH, right? Very successful. You've also expanded into a new frontier, which is amazing. And you're probably the only person I know who's doing this, which is also very interesting. And you've moved into parking lots, which is an interesting subsector of the market. But what made you, take a walk down a city block, look at this asphalt building with no windows, no infrastructure, say, hey, I want to own these? Like, what was the thought process behind
Well,
that?
it didn't happen. It didn't happen that way. And as a lot of these things go, just like how we accidentally stumbled into mobile home parks, we kind of accidentally stumbled into parking. And basically what happened is on my podcast, over the years, every once in a while I like to do kind of oddball, off the wall, like kind of series where I'll interview folks like in just weird niches. And so way before car washes were cool. This is like 10 years ago. I did a whole series where it took me a lot to find like 4 or 5 guys that own car washes, like more than just one. And I interviewed a bunch of car wash guys on the show. This is right when like the current type of car wash that we all see now, like the express car washes with the vacuums, like that concept was brand new to the US. I mean, like there were some, but there weren't many. It's a European concept that came over here. And then I've interviewed guys that own laundromats. I interviewed the largest bowling alley owner in the country. And so like during one of these series, I'm like, parking, that's a different. I think I read an article and I was like, let's find somebody that owns parking. And it proved to be difficult to find someone that actually knew the industry really well. That wasn't just some random legacy family that happened to just own surface parking lots in New York because their family, grandfather bought them, many moons back. And so I met this guy and I interviewed him on the show. He was a broker. He was one of like literally 3 brokers that actually specialize in parking. Now there's 2. He's not in the business anymore. So there's like literally 2 groups that specialize in it. But he wasn't just a broker. He also owned quite a bit of parking lots and garages across the country. And so I interviewed him and I didn't know the niche and there was no resources for me to even learn before this interview. And I asked authentic questions because I was really curious. And after that hour of us talking, I was like, my brain wouldn't stop spinning about a lot of the similarities of like the fragmented nature, the inefficiencies in operations. A lot of that same stuff exists in the parking sector in a different way, but like there was a lot of similarities I saw, and I was intrigued enough to where I called him like the next week and we spent another hour on the phone. I flew him to Tampa, spent a day with him, just trying to pick his brain. I'm like, man, there's something here. And then we went to a couple industry conferences. My partner and I realized that it literally felt like we were in Seco. We joke about like how old mom and poppy Seco is. That's what these industry conferences were like. It was just a very fragmented good old boy niche. A couple institutions in the space, but majority just a very fragmented niche with less than sophisticated type ownership groups. And so we got excited because we saw that meant opportunity to us. Number one, it was very much a contrarian investment. There weren't many groups like ours that were looking to buy parking. We saw it as an opportunity to get in and upgrade technologies, adjust pricing, instill dynamic pricing models that adjust based on supply demand factors. There's a lot of technology that's come about in the space that really allows you to create some major efficiencies in the operations of these parking assets. And so we saw it as an opportunity to buy at what we felt was a fair basis, in incredible locations, irreplaceable type of locations within primary markets and core markets, cash flow today, and know that inevitably, based on the location, whenever parking is not the highest and best use, whether it be 10 years, 15 years, 20, whenever that time comes, that piece of real estate and what's surrounding it it's already got air rights, and we can redevelop it into something else. And we don't underwrite that future value, but we feel very confident in the next 10 to 15 years, and it makes a ton of sense as parking. And we know that parking is literally the lowest valued use based on the location of the land. And so anyway, like that's kind of the general investment thesis of how we look at parking. And we're very critical about what we buy. We look at literally, I don't know the exact, it's a lot. We probably look at 100 deals to find one that truly checks all the boxes. And so for that reason, we've literally only bought one parking deal every year for the last 5 years. And so, they're bigger deals, typically transaction size. They're a lot of times they're, $25-30 million deals. But there's not many that check all of our boxes. And so we can dive into like, what are those boxes, and like, what do we look for? What makes a good deal? What makes a bad deal? Why do we pass on something? I'm more than happy to elaborate.
Yeah. And that's what I want to hear about, because, it doesn't sound like it would be well, maybe it is. And I know very little about parking spaces. I know that you don't probably have the same tenant issues that you do in the manufactured housing space. But how is that value creation made? Like, you're not going in there doing a ton of capex. Is it mostly primary market driven? Is it looking for maybe a distressed situation? Like, how do you create a filter or a buy box for a parking lot?
Yeah, and I could give you. I mean, lots of same ways we do it in manufactured housing. So there are, garages. Like we just bought one in Philadelphia, so I'll use this one as the example. We just bought one in Philadelphia a couple months ago, and they hadn't adjusted pricing. It's like a block away from Liberty Bell, 2 blocks from Independence Hall. I mean, like it is irreplaceable real estate. There's no land left to ever rebuild that parking garage. So like there's a supply demand imbalance there to our favor. But the prior ownership, they number one, their technology, that how they manage the asset hadn't been replaced in like 12 years, and technology has come a long way in 12 years to just adjust even from a dashboard, adjusting pricing on the fly based on special events in the area, times a day, things like that. And so they didn't have that. And so they were leaving a ton of money on the table. There's lots of online reservation platforms that people use now to go park. If they know they're going to the city, they're going to go reserve a space ahead of time. They weren't on any of these platforms. That's literally like that makes up, even a short period of time, that makes up about $60,000 a year of additional revenue right now. And that's like, we've only owned the parking garage for like 2 months, that we found just by literally getting on a couple of digital platforms, and that will grow over time. Their pricing, actually the pricing itself, just what they were charging per hour, was below market by about 15%. And so, in a constrained supply market like Philadelphia, that garage is full every day. People they need to park there. They're not going to not park there or go drive around the block for, 8 times for 30 minutes to save $1 an hour or $2 an hour. Right. So they got this inelastic demand. And so literally we went in and we did make improvements to it. So we redid all the halogen lighting with LED lighting, made it nice and bright and safe. Right. Because it was kind of dingy and dark, and people don't like parking where they don't feel safe, especially women. So we added lighting in there and redid a bunch of we're currently redoing a bunch of concrete, resealing it, restriping lines, redoing stairwells, redoing the elevator, painting things, right? So we're enhancing the quality of it, just like we do with parks. But on this one, literally the mechanism of us literally changing price. I don't know the exact, I think pricing per hour, it was like $10 an hour. I don't remember the exact amount. I think it was $10 an hour, and we literally raised it to $11.50, and we didn't see any change in parkers. But all that $1.50 per hour per car, all 100% went to the bottom line. There's no, there's no additional cost associated with obtaining that additional $1.50. But the supply is it's so constrained in that marketplace that people are going to park there no matter. There's a certain threshold, right? Where if we push pricing to this, then folks would probably drive around the block, 8 times before they parked. But that's not the case. So there's definitely a lot of leeway there to where you can drive value. But like the location is everything. Like if that wasn't such a prime location, we wouldn't necessarily have that much control over or pricing power, right? Like it'd be a little bit different scenario. And that's why we look at literally so many to find the one that checks all the boxes. Like this one here in Philadelphia, of all the parking demand drivers, 70% of the parking demand is transient, which is the highest quality parker, because they're coming for the Philadelphia, all these historical attractions, they've been in demand for hundreds of years. Like people are not going to stop coming to historical Philadelphia. Liberty Bell's not going to go anywhere. Independence Hall's not going to go anywhere,
and
right?
Nobody's coming there on a trip that's going to be there for that day event is going to argue about $1.50 change. They're not even going to notice it because they've already accounted for, I'm going to park my car. I want it to be safe. I want to come back later. And if it's $10, $11, $12, it doesn't matter. It's just convenience of being in that location, and I can walk right back to it.
Yeah.
And I'm safe, comfortable, and I can pull right out. And
That's
once
right.
you have that, you're golden.
There's two 5-star hotels that are in this little submarket are literally on our same block, and these are historic buildings, these hotels, and the people that stay there, they spend $1,000 a night, right? And the only option they have is to valet their vehicle, and guess our garage is the primary valet, and so we have contractual agreements with these two hotels. Again, they're both big brands, both 5-star, and there's pricing power there. Like that hotel has to park the car somewhere. And while we typically sign a multi-year agreement with them, when those things come up for renewal, there's flexibility there, because they're not going to they pass that charge on to the guests anyway, right? And so, are the guests not going to go stay at the hotel? They're spending $1,000 a night because their valet went from $48 to $54 or whatever, you name the price, right? Like they're not. And so there's a lot of all of those variety of quality demand drivers are what we look for, because we know that, again, you can't rebuild that parking lot. Like, number one, there's not land there. Number two, even if you have the land to actually get it approved through zoning to build that, that probably wouldn't happen either, because a lot of cities actually don't really care for standalone parking structures. They just don't. Like a lot of these things were built back in the 70s, 80s, maybe some in the 90s, but most of the stuff's kind of legacy assets that had been there for quite some time. But they're not the prettiest thing, even if you spruce them up, it's a big concrete structure, right, with multiple levels. But so again, back to your original question, like a lot of the same demand drivers that we look at in MHC space, we can go in and add value in a very similar vein. There's a little bit more complexities with with just what are those demand drivers, trying to really drill in of like, what's the risk around that going away? And so a lot of the stuff we look at, and that gets back to my point of like, we look at a lot to find one that fits the bill. A lot of parking that was built, especially like when we talk about like the urban core locations, a lot of it that was built back in the 70s and 80s was there to mostly service like office buildings, right? To office parkers. And I don't know how to fix that problem. Like I like that is a problem that's outside of my pay grade of like, what does the future of office look like? Especially some of these like older antiquated buildings that have, really high vacancy rates. And so a lot of the parking we look at has a major tie to an office building or more that has vacancy issues right now, which means the parking garage has vacancy issues because there's not that wide variety of other demand drivers that people are coming to that location for, because they used to only come there because they worked in the tower. I don't know how to fix that, and so for that reason, we typically we pass on. And most of those deals, we just move on. We don't mess around with them.
So if I didn't ask this question, I would almost kick myself, but I'm gonna have to ask this question anyway. Does the idea of the automated, people are talking about automated cars, self-driving cars, does that weigh into your risk profile when you're looking at these deals? Like, how do you mitigate?
To a certain degree. Yeah, to a certain degree. So like, again, demand drivers are a big piece of it. But there's different. I'm going to use another example here. We have a property in downtown Phoenix. It's right across from the courthouse. That's I forget the name of the county now, but that county, and that courthouse is the second largest courthouse in the country. And our garage literally is the primary garage right across. But not aside from the courthouse, we've got Phoenix Suns Arena is 2 blocks away. Arizona Diamondbacks, it's 3 blocks away. And then Phoenix is a 24/7 city. So there's always something going on. There's lots of retail and entertainment. There's an entertainment district across the street from our garage. There's a hotel, a Moxie hotel on the same block. There's a Hilton Inn on the same block. So they use our valet. And then the last piece I'll make mention of there, Phoenix is very much a driving city. I mean, it's such a wide and dispersed area. Their mass transit system sucks. It's not good. It's just a very sprawling city. And so I'm not going to say that there's a risk at some point in the future, but I think that everyone that's in Phoenix that's going downtown is going to take a ride share service. I think is very short sighted. Even when you look at like going to court, right? If you got a court date, is everyone that has a court date, are they going to at some point in the very near future rely upon a ride share service to take them to and from their court date when they live 40 minutes outside the city? So I think there's a risk, but I don't think it's significant in most of the markets where we actually buy and own in. And the last thing I'll make mention of here, I think what hasn't been figured out, and again, time will tell in the future, is these cars have to go somewhere. And I get like the whole idea is to have these things just keep rolling around and picking people up and dropping them off. But like, if you've got those doing that nonstop while you've got other normal cars still on the road, like there's going to be a period of time where like it's too congested. These things are going to have to go actually stage somewhere. They got to go somewhere until they get their next call. And so where would they go stage? Where would they go sit? Where would they go charge while they're waiting for the next pickup or while they're trying to charge their battery for an hour, right? And so like, look, it goes back to location. This one in Phoenix, this is literally in the heart of the city. I mean, it is the best located garage in the entire city. And so in the event that time comes where we got these, robotic taxis driving around, they need to go somewhere. And so actually there's been a number of folks we've actually talked to, I'm not going to name the names because we're still in negotiations, where they need staging area. They want us to work with them to dedicate X amount of spaces so that they've got a place to put infrastructure and a place for their vehicles to go so they can charge or they can go in there during their downtime. So I think it all really ties back to if you literally have the best location in a particular marketplace, inevitably there will be a demand for something when parking might not be the highest and best use at that point. And whether it be 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, something else will be of higher demand there. It's just a matter of time. But as long as we make it work for parking in the interim, and like that's what we underwrite on, then it's a no-brainer to us. And so that's kind of how we think of it. Everyone's got a different perspective on the future and how fast this is going to evolve. I think you have a higher risk of like these technologies having an impact in cities like San Francisco.
I think if you have the right location, Kevin, at the end of the day, real estate's always about location, location, location. If you have the right location, I think you'll always find a use for it, and you're creating income from it now. Like you're going to be in position to profit from it one way or the other. So I think you've done a fantastic job. And I don't want to say it's like reinventing yourself, but finding those niches that's allowed you to continue to grow. And just last question. I mean, what do you think that principle, that framework that's kept you grounded to keep looking and reinventing yourself or looking for those opportunities? What would you, if that was a one guiding principle, what would you say that was?
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't, number one, I don't think I'm employable. I don't know if I would be able to actually ever go work for somebody. I think that's what kind of pushed me back into real estate. I'm like, well, what else do I do? This is what I know. And honestly, the second big piece of it, like I really do love, I love, the culture we created. I love the organization. I love the team we built. But at the end of the day, if you really want to simplify it all, like I think I found what I really enjoy doing. I'm a deal junkie. I love the hunt, and I love finding opportunity, and I love turning, something that, is, has deferred maintenance, and, everyone is, kind of dropping it into the ugly bucket and proving them wrong. And that, hey, like this thing can be something that the community's proud of. The residents can be proud to live here, and we can, it's rewarding to create a clean, safe, quiet, and respectable place for folks to live and raise their family. So, but really, if you can drilling that down, like I love doing deals. Like I love what I do. I enjoy having these conversations. I love talking shop. And so I don't think it's as simple as finding what you love and money will follow, but there's something definitely to finding truly what you enjoy doing and trying to build a business around it. I think that you can't go wrong if you take that path.
That's great advice. Kevin, if anybody who's listening to this program wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
Yeah, you can find me. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn as well as the other social channels, but very active on LinkedIn. So you can find me there. And then if you want to learn what we're doing at Sunrise, my company, you can go to investwithsunrise.com. We've got a number of white papers on parking investments, kind of our investment thesis, manufactured housing as well. We've got a number of case studies we share on our website. We go pretty granular with sharing details of what we've done historically, what current deals are or that we've recently purchased, what the business plan is. And then we've got, normally have some type of offering open. So you can research that as well and watch webinars and get more details. So again, that's investwithsunrise.com.
Kevin, it's always a great talking shop with you, getting your insight on the market. If you listening have gotten value from this episode, like it, share it on the platform you're listening to. That's how we reach other people. And if you have any questions, obviously always send us a DM. Until next time, everyone, happy investing.